The night was cold out in Mira Loma, quiet enough to hear the hum of streetlights before everything broke loose. 1 second it was car engines and chatter. The next, it was screams and gunfire cutting through the dark. 2 bodies hit the pavement, one girl bleeding, paralyzed, crying out for help that never came. They said the shooter told the crowd, "I'm not scared to die," before stepping into the smoke. Nobody laughed that night. The street didn't forget his words, but this story didn't start there. Long before that gunfire, he was just a kid from 109th Street, a blood raised by a blood, and the hood already had plans for him. DeAndre L. Bonner came into the world on February 15, 1991, right in the middle of South Central Los Angeles, where gang politics were as normal as Sunday dinners. His block sat near 109th and Figueroa, deep in Denver Lane Blood territory, a small stretch of streets that had seen generations live and die over red flags and pride. The people around him didn't talk about escaping the hood. They talked about surviving inside it. By the time he could ride a bike, he already knew which corners belonged to who and which colors could get you pressed. There was never a man at home to teach him how to be one. Only older homies and a mother who already knew what gang life looked like. His mom wasn't a stranger to that world. People said she was respected, connected, maybe even a little feared. She wasn't just watching her son grow up in it. She was part of it. In their neighborhood, the line between family and gang blurred so much that it disappeared. When people said family, sometimes they meant the set. By the time DeAndre turned 12, the Denver Lanes were already family to him. Older members saw something in the skinny kid who didn't talk much but always paid attention. He didn't need to be told the rules because he'd been soaking them up his whole life. When he got put on, it wasn't some quiet thing. It happened right there in the backyard, surrounded by men who had already earned their names in the streets. His mom stood there too, watching, nodding her head while her son took punches that would have broken other kids. She didn't stop it. She approved it. That day, the streets took him fully. Getting put on by your mom is rare, even in LA gang culture. Most mothers cry and beg their sons to stay out of it. But DeAndre's mom believed it was better he belonged somewhere than walk around as a target with no backing. She wanted him protected, even if that protection came with a price. After that day, he wasn't just DeAndre anymore. He was Lil Active, the little homie who stayed ready, who never backed down, who earned his respect fast. The Denver Lane Bloods weren't a massive set, but they were old, solid, and surrounded by enemies. Their main beef was with the Hoovers, a feud older than most of the kids fighting in it. Every corner of 109th carried history. Every block had a story of someone lost. To DeAndre, that wasn't fear, it was motivation. Being from DLB meant he carried weight, and at 12 years old, he wanted that more than anything. He started hanging around the older homies, running small errands, keeping lookout, learning the rhythm of the hood. It wasn't about money yet, it was about proving yourself. He watched how older gangsters carried themselves, how they spoke, how they moved when police rolled up, how they never looked nervous. He learned quick that silence could save your life, and that being too loud could take it. People in the neighborhood started noticing how serious the kid was. He didn't smile much, didn't brag, didn't front. Some said he was just quiet. Others said he was already thinking like a soldier. Around that time, someone gave him a small pistol just to hold, telling him he might need it someday. He took it like it was a trophy, not realizing it was the first step toward a life he wouldn't be able to leave behind. Home wasn't peaceful either. His mom did what she could, but their world revolved around the hood. Friends came and went, some to jail, some to graves. Every candlelight memorial on the block was a lesson. DeAndre grew up knowing exactly what could happen, but he still leaned in closer instead of stepping back. In neighborhoods like that, walking away sometimes looked weaker than dying for respect. By the time he got to middle school, he already understood gang politics better than adults did. He knew who the Hoovers were, knew which streets to avoid, and which corners you could post on without catching heat. His name started floating around because he moved like someone older. Older homies like that, they'd say, Lil Active really with it. And for a kid who never had much, that kind of respect was everything. There wasn't much else for him to chase. School didn't hold his attention. Teachers couldn't talk him out of the life because he didn't see any other one. He'd seen kids with good grades still get hit by stray bullets. He'd seen families lose sons who weren't even banging. In his eyes, there was no safe route, only sides, and he'd already chosen his. By 13, he was carrying himself like a grown man, though everyone still called him the Lil Homie. His mother kept her distance, but deep down she was proud that her boy was holding his own. She'd tell people he was strong, that he wasn't scared of nothing, That pride would follow him all the way until the headlines, years later, when the same boy from her backyard would turn into one of the most feared names on the South Side. But back then, he was just a kid trying to earn his spot in a world that didn't give second chances. By middle school, he already spoke fluent gang politics, and the streets had already started writing his story for him. Growing up on 109th Street was like walking through a maze where every corner had its own story and every wall had its own warning. The place sat right inside Vermont Vista, south of Manchester Avenue and west of Broadway, surrounded by sets that had been feuding since the mid-'80s. To outsiders, it looked like a regular Los Angeles neighborhood with small houses and palm trees, but anyone from there knew that every block line meant something deeper. The Denver Lane Bloods held down most of 109, keeping their red flags close and their enemies even closer. Up north and east, the 92, 94, and 112 Hoovers kept their hold tight, watching every move from their side. To the south sat the 120 Raymond Crips, who had their own history with the Lanes. The borders between these sets weren't written on paper. They were written in blood, fights, and drive-bys that stretched across decades. Kids from that area learned early what side they were on just by who lived next door. If you were from 109th, you didn't walk toward Hoover Street after dark unless you had a death wish. The colors weren't just about fashion either. Red was Denver Lane. Orange belonged to the Hoovers. Blue stayed with the Crips. Even gray, sometimes worn by the 8 trade gangsters, carried meaning. One wrong hoodie could get you stopped, pressed, or worse. DeAndre saw that before he even turned 10. He'd walk to the corner store and see older homies watching every car that passed, ready to react to any flash of color that didn't belong. It was normal to him, almost like the city's rhythm beat to the sound of sirens and gunfire. The Lanes had alliances too, tight ones that gave them backup when things got real. The Athens Park Bloods, the Crenshaw Mafias, and the Inglewood Family Bloods were like cousins to them, stepping in whenever the pressure got heavy. These alliances weren't based on paper agreements, but on shared wars and the same enemies. When a Hoover hit a lane, other blood sets felt it too. That's how thick the politics ran in South Central. DeAndre started to understand all that before he even hit high school. He'd see R.I.P. shirts getting printed at the swap meet for boys who weren't much older than him. He'd pass candlelight vigils at night, hearing mothers cry for sons who never made it past 17. Sometimes those same mothers would come out the next morning, sweeping bullet casings off the sidewalk like it was just another day. That was the reality of 109th. The violence wasn't just on the news, it was on the same block where he played football as a kid. It was around this time that DeAndre started hanging closer with older figures from the set, watching how they handled street politics. They called him Lil Active, but he moved with the awareness of someone twice his age. He knew which streets belonged to who, where the Hoovers hung out, and which alleys were safe to cut through. He wasn't scared to cross lines, but he was smart enough to read the room before stepping in. Every night, the sound of helicopters circling above made sleep feel temporary. The cops were always in the area, running raids, chasing cars, breaking up crowds. The LAPD and Sheriff's Department had their own zones of control too, and sometimes that made things worse. The more they cracked down, the more the sets tried to hold their ground. DeAndre's generation was growing up in a city where being calm looked weak and being fearless got you noticed. By the time he reached his early teens, he'd already seen more death than most grown men. A friend from down the street got caught in a crossfire outside a liquor store, and that stuck with him. It didn't make him want to run from the life. It made him lean into it. Every time a Denver Lane got hit, he took it personal. Every time a Hoover bragged online, he felt it was aimed at him. Life on 109 wasn't about finding peace. It was about making your name mean something before someone took it away. To DeAndre, the street wasn't a choice. It was the only language he knew. You didn't choose sides here, you inherited them. In the mid-90s, before DeAndre's name ever hit the streets, there was another name ringing through Denver Lane territory, Bruce B-Brazy Parrish Jr. He was one of the original faces of the Damu Riders movement, a group of blood rappers who put their stories into music while the Crips had Snoop and C-Murder repping their side. B-Brazy was young, flashy, and proud of being from Denver Lane. His songs mixed neighborhood pride with real-life pain, and his charisma made him a legend among blood sets across Los Angeles. The Damu Riders era gave the Bloods a voice during a time when Crip culture dominated hip-hop. Their music videos showed faces people recognized from the block, not polished studio stars. For the Denver Lanes, B-Brazy was more than a rapper. He was proof that someone from the red side could make it big without switching up. Kids on 109th looked up to him like he was family, and young DeAndre was one of them. Then came 2003, when the news hit that Bruce Parrish Jr. had been shot and killed. It happened after an argument that turned deadly in Inglewood. The man who made Damu Riders a street anthem was gone before he hit 30. For the Denver Lanes, it felt like losing a general. For DeAndre, barely 12, it was personal. He took it as a message that the name Breezy wasn't supposed to die with the man who carried it. In the years after, DeAndre started calling himself Baby B-Brazy, a move that raised eyebrows even among older homies. It was a big name to carry, especially from someone who hadn't even hit 20 yet, but he said it was out of respect, not ego. To him, it was about keeping the energy alive. He didn't want to copy B-Brazy's music style. He wanted to live up to the same loyalty that made people love him. Older members started taking him more seriously around that time. One OG, known around the set as Big Red, started mentoring him. Big Red had done years in prison and understood how to move without getting caught slipping. He taught DeAndre the rules of work, how to plan, when to speak, when to fall back. It wasn't about being wild, it was about being strategic. He told him that real soldiers didn't brag, they let the streets talk for them. Under Big Red's wing, DeAndre learned how reputation spreads faster than rumors. One good move could make your name, and one bad one could ruin it forever. He watched how Big Red handled neighborhood meetings, how he talked to allies from Athens Park, and how he moved carefully around Hoover lines. Those lessons shaped him more than any classroom could. Taking the Breezy name wasn't just about legacy, it came with enemies too. Old rivalries that started before DeAndre was even born came alive again just from him saying that name. The Hoovers had hated B-Brazy, and now the kid from 109 who carried that same title became the new target. It didn't scare him, it motivated him. Every time he heard a Hoover name, it hit like a personal challenge. By 17, he was no longer Lil Active. He was Baby B-Brazy, a name that carried weight in South Central conversations. People started talking about him like he was next up, not in music, but in the streets. His name showed up on social media posts, tagged in photos where red flags waved behind stolen cars. Cops began recognizing the face too, adding his name to gang databases before he could even legally drink. The neighborhood could feel his presence growing. He started organizing younger homies, telling them to move smarter, to watch every car that passed, to treat every street corner like it was being watched. He wasn't a loud leader, but people followed him anyway. Something about the way he carried himself made it clear he wasn't pretending. The death of Big Red around 2012 hit him hard. The OG was killed in a shootout near Western Avenue, and that loss cracked something inside DeAndre. The man who taught him patience was gone, and what replaced that patience was anger. From that point forward, he stopped trying to avoid the war and started trying to win it. He wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing revenge. By the time he reached his 20s, Baby B-Brazy wasn't just a name on 109th. It was an identity that carried both respect and fear across Los Angeles. To his set, he was a young soldier who held down the lane with pride. To his enemies, he was a walking reminder that Denver Lane never forgot its dead. Every time someone whispered his name, they said it with a mix of respect and caution. What started as a tribute had now become a mission. The name Breezy wasn't just a nickname anymore. It had turned into a prophecy, one that would follow him everywhere, from the streets of South Central to the stories that would later make him infamous. He didn't know it yet, but that same name that earned him respect on 109th would also drag him into the kind of violence that only ends two ways, in a cell or a coffin. The story between the Denver Lane Bloods and the Hoovers didn't start with Baby B-Brazy. That tension had been boiling for decades, stretching back to when the Hoovers were still flying blue and calling themselves the Hoover Crips. Back in the mid-80s, something split that bond wide open. The Hoovers broke away from the Crips and started calling themselves Hoover criminals instead, building their own code and claiming independence from the rest of the Crip structure. It wasn't just a name change, it was a power move that changed the streets of South Central forever. When the Hoovers dropped the Crip title, they didn't lose the street mentality that came with it. They just took it and rebuilt it into something even colder. Their main territory stretched through the heart of Los Angeles, from 43rd all the way up through 112th Street. They ran it block by block, and anyone not part of that world was seen as competition. The Hoovers stood out because they didn't see themselves as just another Crip set anymore. They were something different, something darker, something that wanted total control. The Denver Lanes had been holding their corner of Vermont Vista long before the Hoovers rebranded, and that overlap on 109th was where the bloodshed began. The lanes had been repping red proudly, standing shoulder to shoulder with other blood sets like the Athens Parks and the Crenshaw Mafias. To the Hoovers, that was a problem. Every inch of territory meant money, respect, and dominance. The streets between 108th and 112th turned into invisible battlefields. A simple drive through the wrong block could be a death sentence. In the early 2000s, things got even hotter. A series of shootings kicked off a chain reaction that would last years. One of the biggest pushbacks happened near 111th Place, when Hoover members ran into a group of Denver lanes outside a liquor store. Words got thrown, someone reached, and by the time police arrived, there were bodies on the ground. Nobody talked, nobody testified. Both sides blamed each other, and the cycle just got worse. That was how South Central worked. Every death brought another one. Every funeral turned into a reason to retaliate. For kids like DeAndre, those stories weren't just old history. They were lessons. The older homies would sit around, telling war stories about who got hit and where it happened. They'd name names like trophies, speaking about fallen lanes who had died fighting Hoovers. It made the conflict sound like a duty, not a tragedy. Every young blood in that neighborhood grew up knowing at least one relative, one friend, or one neighbor who got killed by a Hoover. That pain got passed down like a family heirloom. The HK tag started showing up on walls and tattoos everywhere. It stood for Hoover Killer, a statement that didn't need much explaining. It wasn't just a phrase, it was a badge of honor in that part of town. Having those two letters beside your name meant you were part of the war, not just watching it. Older members would say, if you were Lane, you already HK by birth. That's how deep the hatred ran. It wasn't about money or drugs, it was about identity. DeAndre started wearing that mindset early. To him, beefing with the Hoovers wasn't something he chose, it was something expected. His uncles had done time over it. His cousins had died behind it. The whole neighborhood had grown around that conflict like a scar that never healed. People talked about peace sometimes, but nobody really believed it. Not when generations of pain had already shaped the streets. The Hoovers were known for moving differently. They were disciplined, sharp, and never scared to take risks. They'd slide through red zones without warning, shooting from cars or creeping on foot. They were mostly made up of young members trying to make a name for themselves, which made them unpredictable. Denver Lane learned to move just as strategic. They started posting lookouts, keeping radios on, and tracking Hoover cars the way soldiers track enemies in a war zone. This constant tension made the neighborhood feel like a front line. Kids learned how to spot danger before they learned algebra. They knew which direction gunshots came from, which alleys to run through, and where to duck when headlights flashed at night. The city might have called them gang members, but to them, it was survival. Every corner held a story of revenge, and every story fed the next one. DeAndre saw it all play out before his eyes. He saw how older homies carried pride in their scars, how funerals turned into roll calls of fallen brothers. He saw how mothers dressed in red still stood tall at candlelight vigils, refusing to cry in front of cameras. That toughness shaped him. He began to see violence not as something wrong, but as something necessary. The way soldiers talk about war, that's how the lanes talked about the Hoovers. He began hearing stories about past legends from the lane, names like B-Brazy, Peanut, and Red Dog, who had gone head-to-head with Hoovers in the 90s and early 2000s. Each story was told with admiration, as if these men had fought for something sacred. DeAndre wanted to earn that same kind of respect. Every time someone mentioned a Hoover name, it lit a spark in him. He didn't care about fame, he cared about revenge. It wasn't just about who was right or wrong anymore. It had become a cycle of inherited violence. The Denver lanes saw the Hoovers as sworn enemies, and the Hoovers felt the same way. No one remembered how it truly started, but nobody cared to find out. What mattered was keeping the loyalty alive. That loyalty turned into an unspoken law. If a Hoover took one of yours, you had to take one of theirs. Psychologists might call it trauma, but in the streets, it was just life. For kids growing up in South Central, violence was like background noise. It was the way people coped with loss and proved loyalty at the same time. To outsiders, it looked senseless. To them, it was structure. The more DeAndre heard about the feud, the more he accepted that his role was already written. He wasn't trying to break the cycle, he was trying to survive inside it. By 16, DeAndre wasn't just repping Denver Lane anymore. He had become part of its heartbeat. The hood saw him as one of the young soldiers who was ready for whatever came next. His name started moving from whispers to conversations, and every mention came with the same tone, respect mixed with fear. By then, he wasn't just another young blood holding down the block. He was the block's weapon, molded by history, driven by grief, and guided by a war that started long before he was even born. By 16, Baby B-Brazy wasn't just hanging on the block anymore. He had started moving like someone who wanted to prove he could handle pressure. Older homies began trusting him with small runs, mostly things that required heart and quiet focus. He'd slide through Hoover territory on solo missions, tagging up walls and snapping pictures just to show he could get in and out untouched. That was the kind of energy that got people talking. In the streets, it was never about what you said. It was about what you did when nobody was watching. Back then, the internet had already started changing gang life. Social media made every move visible, and DeAndre knew how to use it to send messages without saying a word. He'd post pictures in enemy zones, standing by street signs that spelled out danger. He'd throw up his set, sometimes with a smirk that looked more like defiance than pride. The post didn't need captions. Everyone who mattered already understood what he was saying. Those little flexes built his legend faster than anything else could. People started whispering that he was the little homie who didn't miss, the one who pulled up and handled business without hesitation. Nobody could say exactly how many hits he had been involved in, but the rumors alone gave him weight. When the police started taking pictures of graffiti walls, they noticed his tag showing up in too many places it shouldn't have. To the Denver lanes, that meant respect. To the cops, it meant attention. He had a way of moving that made older members respect him. He didn't talk too much, didn't brag, didn't post things that would get him caught. He carried himself like he'd already seen too much, even though he was still a teenager. When he showed up at neighborhood meetings, older heads treated him like a grown man. By 17, he had already earned his stripes the hard way, but the streets always had a price. It wasn't long before he caught his first real charge. The case came in 2010 after a fight with officers during a traffic stop in South Los Angeles. The report said he refused to comply, and when they tried to detain him, he swung on them. They used tear gas to control him, but even while coughing and blinded, he still tried to fight. That story spread fast. Nobody cared about the exact charges. What mattered was that he didn't fold. The judge handed him 2 years for assault on officers and resisting arrest. For most kids, that would have been enough to slow them down. For DeAndre, it just made him colder. Juvenile hall was already familiar to him, but state prison was different. It was harder, louder, and full of men who wanted to test him. He earned respect quick by standing his ground during his first week. When someone tried to take his food tray, he fought until guards broke it up. That kind of energy got noticed inside. People said he wasn't the biggest, but his heart made up for his size. He served his 2 years without backing down once. The time didn't break him, it shaped him. The long nights sitting on that bunk made him think more about loyalty and how fast people could forget you when you were gone. He came home sharper, quieter, and more strategic. The first thing he did after release was go back to the block. Everyone was waiting. The young homie who fought police and never folded had returned, and he was ready for whatever came next. Not long after, tragedy struck the Denver Lane circle again. One of his closest homies, known as Baby Hang, was killed in a drive-by near 107th Street. Nobody knew exactly who pulled the trigger, but everyone on the block believed it was Hoover connected. That loss hit DeAndre hard. Baby Hang wasn't just a friend, he was like a younger brother who had always looked up to him. The two had made plans to make money together, maybe even move away from the city someday. All that disappeared in one night of gunfire. The funeral brought out the whole set. Red flags waved high, faces filled with silent anger, and DeAndre stood near the casket without saying a word. When people tried to comfort him, he only nodded. Later that night, he pulled aside one of the older heads and said something that stuck. "It's gonna be a hot summer." In that world, those words didn't mean weather. They meant war. A hot summer was the code everyone understood. It meant no sleep, no breaks, and no mercy. It meant every rival car that crossed their street would get checked, every slight would get answered, and every name on their list would get crossed off. It wasn't about chaos, it was about balance, at least how they saw it. One of theirs was gone, so someone had to go too. The weeks after Baby Hang's death changed the tone of the neighborhood. The police presence grew heavier, with patrol cars circling the area day and night. Locals said they could feel the tension in the air, like the city itself was waiting for something to happen. DeAndre didn't hide his pain, but he didn't talk about it either. He spent more time in cars, more nights outside, and less time sleeping. His close circle shrank, and the people around him started noticing the shift. By the end of that summer, his name carried a new kind of fear. Even people outside the set had started hearing about him. The Hoover sets around the area began moving differently, watching every lane corner twice before posting up. Police started collecting his photos and tracking his movements more closely. Inside the department, detectives began calling him a violent risk. On the block, His people called him a soldier. The older heads saw that he wasn't just another young blood trying to make noise. He was someone who believed in what he was doing. Every move felt like a step toward making his name mean something permanent. He didn't smile much anymore, and the jokes that used to fly between him and his homies had gone quiet. Losing Baby Hang had flipped a switch that would never turn off. That summer ended with fewer words and more smoke. Cars burned, sirens echoed, and the names of the dead piled up faster than the city could keep count. People started saying that the streets were catching fire again, and every headline about another shooting near Vermont Avenue had the same rhythm. For Baby B-Brazy, that season was personal. He didn't see it as revenge, he saw it as balance, and when the heat rose, bodies followed. By early 2015, Baby B-Brazy had already earned his rep as one of the Denver lane's most active hitters. His name floated through police files and neighborhood whispers like a warning. That spring, he got caught up in a daytime burglary in Pasadena. It was supposed to be an easy grab, a quiet house, some quick money, nothing loud. Instead, it turned into chaos. A neighbor spotted them breaking in and called 911. Within minutes, the Pasadena police helicopter was circling overhead, tracking the getaway car down Fair Oaks Avenue. The chase tore through red lights until they ditched the car in an alley. Officers found stolen electronics and jewelry in the trunk, plus gloves and a .380 shell casing. Breezy was caught trying to run through a backyard fence, winded but calm. He took the charge with a smirk, like it was nothing new. He got released on bail after 2 months, walking out with that same calm look on his face. For most people, that kind of close call would have been a warning. For him, it felt like a countdown. Freedom became the spark for something bigger, a season of pure chaos that would burn through Los Angeles one body at a time. The new year didn't start quiet. On January 17, 2015, just weeks after getting out on bail, Breezy and two homies, Cedric Kilo Parker and Maurice Wolfie Jones, spotted a silver Mercedes-Benz idling outside a laundromat near Imperial Highway. The driver was distracted, talking on the phone. Breezy slid up fast, pulled the door open and flashed a piece. The man froze, dropped his phone, and backed away as they peeled off with the car. That Mercedes became their ride for the next few days. The same night, the trio cruised down toward Hoover turf, near 105 and Figueroa, where a group of 83 Hoover members were hanging outside a liquor store. Surveillance cameras caught the silver Benz creeping slow under the flickering streetlight. The windows rolled down and the shots rang out. Fast, tight bursts from a .380. People scattered, bottles shattered, and a man got hit in the leg while trying to run. Detectives later said the shooting had all the marks of a Denver lane hit, but nobody on the block wanted to talk. The shell casings matched a .380, the same caliber linked to the Pasadena burglary months earlier. To police, that was the first connection. To the streets, it was just another message. The next morning, Breezy posted on Facebook. He didn't mention the shooting, but his post read, "They say they outside, I don't see them though." The caption came with a selfie, red hoodie on, smirk heavy. To the untrained eye, it looked like a regular post, but to anyone who knew the code, it was a direct taunt. The detectives working gang intelligence flagged the post immediately. They had been watching his page since the burglary arrest. They screenshotted the image, cross-referenced the timestamp, and quietly started building a timeline. Nobody knocked on his door yet. They wanted to see how far he would go. A month later, the violence jumped from message to murder. It was Sunday afternoon, February 21st, 2015. The sun was out, families were running errands, and traffic crawled through the intersections of Los Angeles County. On 108th Street near Avalon Boulevard, a black Chevrolet pulled up beside a white Infiniti sedan, stopped at a red light. Inside that Infiniti was 21-year-old Nathaniel Ankar, a college student with no gang ties. He was on his way to visit a friend in Compton. Witnesses said the shooter leaned halfway out of the window, aimed and fired multiple times into the driver's side. The first shot hit Nathaniel in the chest, the next in the shoulder, and one grazed his neck. The Infiniti drifted across the intersection, bumping into a parked car before stopping. The shooter's car sped off, tires screeching as bystanders ducked for cover. Police and paramedics arrived minutes later, but Nathaniel was already gone. One witness, a woman named Letitia Williams, told investigators she saw the whole thing from her porch. She described a man with a tattooed neck and short braids hanging out the window of a black Chevy, his arms steady, eyes cold. That detail stuck with detectives. It sounded like the description they'd already seen in the Pasadena and liquor store reports. Ballistics later confirmed it. The shell casings found at the scene matched the same .380 from both earlier incidents. To detectives, the trail was clear. The same shooter, same weapon, same style. They just needed proof it was Breezy behind the trigger. Nathaniel's death shook the local community. His mother, Yolanda, went on television saying her son wasn't part of the streets. "He just stopped at the light," she said through tears. "He never even saw them coming." That line hit everyone watching. It showed how random the violence had become. For Breezy, the shooting didn't feel random. In his world, it was another hit in a war that had no rules. He bragged quietly to people around him, saying the streets were getting cleaned up. His friends said he'd come back from the ride with that same half smile, no emotion, just silence. It was like he'd stopped seeing faces. To him, the Hoovers weren't people anymore, just targets. Detectives from LAPD's Southeast Division kept his name off the public radar. They followed his Facebook again, tracing every post and comment. He never admitted to the killing, but his next status hit differently. He wrote, "Some things we don't talk about, they just get handled." The comment section filled with fire emojis and free Breezy tags, even though he wasn't locked up yet. The arrogance of it all made detectives patient. They knew he was spiraling, and they wanted to catch him in motion. Behind the scenes, the Denver Lane Bloods were starting to feel pressure. Every shooting brought more surveillance, more police on the corners, more raids. The Hoovers retaliated too, spraying houses and jumping anyone who looked like they were from the lanes, but Breezy didn't slow down. To him, chaos wasn't danger, it was opportunity. March 2015 hit like a movie reel running too fast. It was 4 days that flipped the city upside down, and it started with the killing of Kaylen Warren on March 18th. Kaylen was 20 years old, a local from Westmont, and word spread that he got shot while sitting in a parked car outside a friend's house. Witnesses said the shooter walked right up, fired twice, and disappeared into a waiting sedan. Nobody saw faces, but the weapon left behind .380 casings, the same signature that had become Breezy's shadow. Detectives weren't even done processing that scene when another one hit the wire. On March 20th, around 10:30 at night, a silver Mercedes-Benz rolled through 108th Street again, the same route as the January shooting. Breezy and his crew had been drinking, riding around listening to music when they spotted a small group of Crips on the corner. Words got exchanged, middle fingers flashed, and then it turned into gunfire. Multiple witnesses said the car slowed down before someone leaned out the window and started shooting. The Crips fired back, bullets tearing through windshields as cars swerved off the road. By the time it ended, 2 people were hit, none dead, but the city was boiling. The very next afternoon, March 21st, Breezy and the crew checked into a motel off Century Boulevard. The plan was to chill, count money, and lay low, but he couldn't sit still. Around 4 p.m., they hit a nearby trap motel, robbing a local hustler at gunpoint for cash and weed. It was reckless, loud, and unnecessary, but it showed how untouchable he felt. He'd walk into danger like it was routine. That same night would end everything. Around 10 p.m., Stephen "Stilo" Johnson, a known member of the 83 Hoover criminals, was hanging outside a liquor store on 108th and Denker. He had been arguing with someone on the phone when a silver Mercedes pulled up again. Witnesses later said the shooter stepped out this time, raised a .380, and fired several rounds into Stilo's chest. Stilo fell immediately. The shooter jumped back into the car, and the Mercedes peeled off down the block. A few blocks away, LAPD officers heard the shots and spotted the silver car speeding. The chase that followed cut through alleyways, over sidewalks, and across stop signs. Inside the car were Breezy, Wolfie, and Kilo. When the car crashed into an apartment complex gate, they bailed. Breezy disappeared into the dark, running through backyards. Kilo tripped and got caught by officers. Wolfie got tackled near a dumpster. The gun wasn't in the car, but officers found shell casings in Kilo's pocket. The next morning, the story hit every local news station. Gang member gunned down outside liquor store. The headlines read, "Police didn't release names yet, but the streets already knew." Stilo had been a Hoover regular, and everyone knew which set would get the blame. The retaliation threats started flying before sunrise. During questioning, Wolfie tried to play smart. He told detectives the car had been stolen earlier that day and that he didn't know the shooter. He even claimed he had been carjacked by 2 men who forced him to drive. It sounded ridiculous, but he stuck with it. Kilo stayed silent, only asking for a lawyer. Breezy was nowhere to be found. Detectives weren't fooled. They'd been watching the pattern for months. Same weapons, same targets, and same car. They already had surveillance footage from earlier shootings showing Breezy's build and walk. Now they had 2 witnesses, matching casings, and a stolen car linking every scene together. For the first time, the myth around baby B-Brazy started cracking. He had always been the one who never got caught, the one who moved too smart for police. But the heat was real now. The Pasadena case had given them his fingerprints, and the ballistics were stacking against him. They even traced one of his old Facebook photos showing him with a silver Mercedes just weeks before the liquor store murder. While police searched for him, he stayed hidden in South Central, moving between friends' apartments and backyards. He shaved his head and used other people's phones. The Denver Lane set was split. Some said he needed to get out of state, others said he should stay and fight it. Breezy didn't listen to anyone. He still walked around the neighborhood at night, quiet and focused, watching patrol cars roll by like they were ghosts. By the time the sun rose on March 22nd, everything had changed. Stephen Stilo Johnson was dead. Cedric Kilo Parker was sitting in a holding cell, and Maurice Wolfie Jones was weaving lies to detectives. And somewhere out there, baby B-Brazy was still free, but not for long. The city buzzed with rumors, half in fear and half in respect. Some called him a monster, others called him a soldier. Either way, everyone knew one thing. The war on 109th had found its most dangerous player. By sunrise, one was dead, one was caught, and one was running, and the whole city was watching. The morning after the shooting of Stephen Stilo Johnson, South Central felt like it was holding its breath. LAPD and the sheriff's department rolled through Vermont Vista heavy, blocking off streets and kicking in doors. Detectives already knew who they were looking for. The name Baby B-Brazy had moved from neighborhood rumor to an official manhunt file. Every corner in Denver Lane territory got hit with search teams. Helicopters circled low, sirens echoing down 109th Street, and the hood lit up with word that Breezy was on the run. He didn't make it far. Around dawn, police tracked a silver Mercedes parked near a small apartment complex in Inglewood. Inside the car, they found a half-empty soda can, a red bandana, and .380 shell casings in the cup holder. A K-9 unit swept the area and caught a scent trail through a nearby alley. Within minutes, they found Breezy hiding behind a dumpster, breathing heavy but still quiet. The same calm look on his face he'd had during every other arrest. The gun, a .380 semi-automatic, sat under a cardboard box near his feet. It was clean but still smelled like burnt powder. Officers cuffed him without a struggle. When they walked him out, neighbors filmed it on their phones, their voices mixed between shock and silence. For some, it was just another day in South Central. For others, it felt like watching a ghost finally get caught. Back at the station, detectives began the discovery process. Ballistics came first. Every casing matched, from the Pasadena burglary to the liquor store shooting to the murders of Nathaniel Ankar and Stephen Johnson. The same weapon, the same trajectory, the same shooter. Then came the digital trail. Cell tower pings placed Breezy's phone near each crime scene at the same times. They pulled up Facebook posts, time-stamped within hours of every attack. It was all there. The arrogance, the coded messages, the same rhythm that had taunted detectives for months. Meanwhile, Maurice Wolfie Jones had been sitting in county jail after his arrest from the chase. He tried to play smart again, denying everything, but detectives weren't in a rush. They had a plan, something called the Perkins operation. It was a tactic where undercover officers posed as inmates to get suspects talking. They placed Wolfie in a holding cell with two supposed inmates who were actually working for law enforcement. Hidden microphones recorded everything. The officers acted casual, asking about the case, pretending to be sympathetic. Within an hour, Wolfie started talking. He bragged that his bro did it clean, saying Braze finished him. Hit him right in the chest. He laughed while telling them about how the car crashed and how Breezy ran through the apartments barefoot. He didn't know the whole thing was being recorded. That conversation broke the case wide open. Detectives had confirmation linking the crew to the murders straight from one of their mouths. They brought the recording into the evidence file and started prepping for trial. The courtroom stayed packed when the case went to trial in late 2016. Reporters lined the hallway. Families from both sides sat in silence, and prosecutors laid out every detail like a timeline of destruction. They opened with the Pasadena burglary, then moved through each shooting one by one. The prosecutor showed photos of shell casings, surveillance clips, and even Breezy's Facebook screenshots with captions like "loyalty over love" and "we don't do warnings." The tone was cold, deliberate, like they were building a movie script from real lives. Witnesses came forward carefully. Laetitia Williams, the woman who saw Nathaniel Ankar's shooting, identified Breezy as the man leaning out the car window. Forensics backed her up with trajectory data showing shots came from the height of someone Breezy's size. Detectives explained how the same .380 tied every scene together. The cell tower records put his phone in the exact grid of every attack, including the one from February 21st when Ankar was killed. The defense tried to fight back. They claimed the Facebook posts were just street talk, not confessions. They said the shell casings couldn't be tied to Breezy's gun because too many hands touched the weapon. They even brought in a girlfriend to offer an alibi, saying he was at her place during one of the shootings. But when she took the stand, she froze. Her eyes filled with tears, and she refused to testify further. The judge warned her, but she stayed quiet, saying only, "I can't do this." That silence spoke louder than any statement. When the prosecution replayed the Perkins recording, the courtroom went still. Hearing Wolfie brag about Breezy finished him hit hard. Even jurors leaned forward, faces tight. It was the missing piece. The voice on that tape erased any doubt. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury took just 2 days to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. 2 murders, multiple attempted murders, carjacking, burglary, and gang enhancements. The judge read the sentence slowly, his voice heavy with finality. Breezy showed no emotion, staring straight ahead as the judge handed down 2 life without parole sentences plus 227 years. The courtroom murmured. That number sounded unreal, like something from another world, but in California law it made sense. Each crime stacked on the last until it reached eternity. When the sentence came down, family members from the victim's side cried quietly. Nathaniel Ankar's mother whispered, "Now maybe we can rest." On the other side of the room, a few Denver Lane homies sat silent, faces blank. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared. After the hearing, prosecutors held a short press conference, calling it one of the most violent gang cases in years. They said the evidence was overwhelming: the gun, the Facebook posts, the cell data, and the bragging confession. Reporters called it the unraveling of a local legend. But inside the jail, some still called him a soldier who went too far. When guards led him away, he didn't look angry, just quiet. The same cold calm that had followed him since his first arrest never left. They say he looked at no one, not even his mother sitting in the back row. Maybe it was guilt, maybe pride. Nobody could tell. The paperwork called it justice. The streets called it balance. Either way, it was over. At 27, the same kid who grew up on 109th Street, who got put on by his mom at 12, who lived by a name older than him, had traded the block for a box, life without parole. 2 lifetimes plus 227 years. The war he fought his whole life ended where every road like that eventually leads, behind steel doors, counting years that don't matter anymore. When the bus pulled into California State Prison, baby B-Brazy was just another number in the system. They sent him straight to a level 4 yard, the kind reserved for lifers, killers, and gang leaders who couldn't walk anywhere else. The gates clanged behind him, and the smell of steel and sweat hit immediately. Inside those walls, time didn't move, it just circled. The morning started with alarms, ended with counts, and the space in between was survival. The older inmates told him how it worked. Breakfast at 5 a.m., yard at 8, lockdown by sundown if nothing popped off. Every day was tension waiting to explode. Bloods, Crips, Hoovers, and Sureños all moved like ghosts separated by invisible lines. The guards didn't control peace, respect did. You learned quick who to look at, who to avoid, and who to fight if it came to it. Breezy adapted fast. He stayed quiet, listened more than he talked, and earned his position through patience. Even inside, his name carried weight. Younger inmates whispered about him, calling him that Hoover killer from the lanes. He never bragged about the past, but he didn't deny it either. His rep did the talking. For months, he kept his head down, hitting the yard daily, lifting weights, running laps, and keeping a routine. But the boredom of a life sentence started eating at him. That's when the phones started coming around. Contraband phones were the new gold inside. Every block had one floating through hands for the right price. Inmates used them to text, record, or call home, but Breezy saw something else in them, a voice. Around 2020, he found a way to record clips and send them out through friends on the outside. Those clips eventually landed on YouTube under a new page called Who's Who. Nobody expected it to take off. The first videos were just him talking about daily life inside, the fights, the politics, the food, the guards, but his tone was raw and honest. He spoke with that same South Central rhythm that made it sound like he was right back on the block, only this time the bars were behind him. One of the first viral clips came when he told the story of a yard fade with a Hoover inmate known as 4 Extra. He described it vividly, saying they went round for round until both were exhausted. He laughed, telling how, mid-swing, he reached down, grabbed a bottle of water, took a sip, and went right back to fighting. Didn't even drop my fade, he said, smiling through the phone. The internet ate it up. Pages like No Jumper reposted the clip, and suddenly thousands of comments filled with disbelief, laughter, and praise. Some called him delusional, others called him real. Either way, his voice broke through the wall. That single story turned a lifer into a content figure. The YouTube channel grew fast, hitting hundreds of thousands of views. Each upload came with new stories: smuggling, discipline, prison codes, told with humor, pain, and street knowledge all mixed together. But fame inside prison comes with danger. Other inmates started getting jealous. Some thought he was clout chasing. Others said he was putting too much out there. The guards hated it too. Every time a video dropped, the administration launched cell searches, trying to find the phones. They'd tear his bunk apart, toss his letters, and still come up empty. Every time they confiscated a phone, a new one showed up. It became a game he refused to lose. One of the biggest controversies came from his HK tattoo, the same initials he had inked years before, standing for Hoover Killer. Photos of the tattoo leaked online, and rumors spread that he'd been stabbed inside for it. YouTubers started spinning stories about how Hoovers had jumped him in the shower. When he finally addressed it, he did it with that same calm tone. "Ain't nobody touch me. Y'all believe too much internet talk." He admitted there were tensions, but nothing he couldn't handle. He said he respected real ones on all sides, but still stood on his truth. That response hit hard because it wasn't defensive. It was controlled. It showed how much he'd matured. The same kid who once reacted with violence now used words as his weapon. Still, not everyone liked seeing a blood with a camera in prison. Some officers tried setting him up with false write-ups, accusing him of running a gang propaganda operation. Each time they caught a phone, he just built another channel under a new name. Then came the infamous Vaseline story. He dropped that one night in 2022, talking about corruption inside the system. He told how some guards looked the other way while inmates extorted others, how older convicts preyed on new fish, and how he once saw a CO smuggle in Vaseline for the wrong reasons. The way he told it was part comedy, part horror, part reality check. "This the type of sick energy behind these walls," he said, looking straight into the phone camera. That clip blew up fast, crossing 1 million views in a week. People outside started debating whether he was exposing truth or exaggerating for clout. Podcasts picked up the topic, No Jumper, Street TV, and others ran headlines like Baby B-Brazy speaks from prison. It gave him a strange kind of power, the kind that reached far beyond his cell. Fans started sending money to his commissary, writing letters, even trying to visit. He had built a digital army from behind bars, but that attention also brought pressure from inside. Some inmates didn't like how his words painted the yard. One altercation broke out when another lifer accused him of talking too much. They went heads up in the day room, and afterward, he walked back to his cell bleeding from a cut above his eyebrow, laughing it off like it was just another day. The guards transferred him to another unit soon after. Even through all that, he kept pushing. Each time they found a phone, he found another. Each time they deleted a channel, another popped up. His content shifted too, less about fights, more about reflection. He started speaking on loyalty, betrayal, and how the system breaks men who never learned to deal with pain. He told young viewers not to follow his path, warning them that the same fame they chase could turn into a cage. By 2024, he had become one of the most recognizable prison voices online. His quotes started circulating across TikTok and Instagram Reels. People repeated his lines like gospel. "You can cage the body, not the voice." That became his motto. It summed up everything he had turned into, a man locked down physically but still free in thought. Inside those walls, he was still DeAndre Bonner, inmate number J76942. But to the outside world, he had become Baby B-Brazy. The blood from 109 went from shooter to storyteller. His journey showed that even from the tightest cell, a man could still reach millions. And though the gates had closed on his body forever, his voice had already escaped. Behind bars, Baby B-Brazy became a paradox, a killer who turned into a messenger. His stories gave outsiders a raw view of life behind the walls and the streets that shaped him. Some saw redemption, others saw manipulation, but either way, his name carried power again. Younger homies quoted his words, calling him proof that even a lost soul could still teach something. In his own recordings, he spoke with calm regret, saying, "The streets raised me, but they never loved me." His legend now lives in two worlds, feared on the block, streamed across the internet. The boy his mother put on at 12 became a voice trapped in steel, telling everyone listening that the game always ends the same, either the grave or the cage, and he got the latter.